Those trees have life, and they have meanings and messages, and so I'm going to
I was actually shot myself. My arm went numb out of nowhere, and my head sort of started it felt like it was ringing. And I turned around to see what happened, and there's just blood gushing out of my arm, and my whole face was immediately covered in blood.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is shown on over 25 cable stations from Vermont to New York City. On the internet at thestruggle.org. Our YouTube channel, Struggle Video Media. The head of the New York Police Union has claimed that the murder of 2 New York police officers by a deranged man was inspired by criticism of police brutality and mass marches. The Black Lives Matter civil rights movement is debating how to respond. Journalist Davey D wrote a piece I saw on Black Agenda Report that talked about another set of police killings earlier this year. He reminded us it involved convicted fellow Jared Miller and his wife Amanda, who hung out at the Cliven Bundy Ranch in Nevada, where several dozen angry folks who were protesting the government's attempt to evict Bundy from the federal grounds he had leased but did not pay rent for. The protesters had an armed standoff with over 200 police officers who attempted to move Bundy. The Millers were hoping the Bundy Ranch would be the jump-off point for an armed rebellion against police. The Miller couple felt that Bundy's people weren't radical enough. They described the police as oppressors, and upon leaving the ranch, they went off to set off a revolution. The pair had long talked about wanting to kill cops. Armed with body armor and packed to the hilt, the pair ambushed 2 Las Vegas Metro cops who were eating lunch in a diner. After they killed the cops, Jared Miller shot off several rounds into the air and loudly declared the revolution was on. They also draped the Gadsden flag on one of the officers' bodies. The Revolutionary War flag and its slogan, "Don't Tread on Me," was adopted by the Tea Party movement. The couple later engaged in a 15-minute shootout with police in which they died. In the aftermath of the Miller cop killings, there were no police union reps like Patrick Lynch making public assertions, even within police-oriented publications that lambasted the Tea Party movement, the open carry movement, or even the movement around Cliven Bundy. There was no public accusation about any of these movements having blood on their hands. Those were the thoughts of Davey D. Davey D doesn't say it, but the marked underreaction of police and politicians to the Nevada murders, compared to what they say about the killings of the New York policemen, has to do with race. The Millers were white, loved Nazi swastikas, and wanted to bring back the so-called good old days of white supremacy. Their killings of police didn't bring on the hysteria that led former New York City Police Commissioner Carrick to claim that brutality protests amounted to, quote, war on our homeland, unquote. For an excellent viewpoint on all of this, do an internet search for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Time magazine. Jabbar wrote a column, "The police aren't under attack. Institutional racism is." Many topics on the show today, from Keystone XL to Libya to Gaza.
It's crooked. This is real. This is authentic. And it's such an honor to play this. But those trees have life, and they have meanings and messages. And so I'm going to play something on this flute. And thank you again.
course, besides the effects on world climate, the pipeline would be a disaster for Indian nations.
Iglanate. My name is Ariel Tsekwe Duranje, and my name means Thunder Woman. My mom always says she named me properly because I've used my voice and I've used my thunder. I want to thank everyone for coming out and supporting this really great initiative. Because I do it for the future generations. I do it for my children and the children of my brothers and sisters and the ones that stand behind me, Crystal Lehman from the Beaver Lake Cree Nation and my cousin Gitz Crazy Boy from the Athabasca Chippewa First Nation. Because we are from the front lines of the oil that's coming through these pipelines. We are the ones that are bearing some of the worst impacts of these projects that are out of control, and they are destroying the land, the culture, and the people that live beside these extraction zones. And enough is enough. I'm so glad to see a gathering like this, the Cowboy Indian Alliance. It shows the strengths and the foundations of this country. When the European settlers came here, they made agreements with the First Nations and the Native Americans. These agreements were called treaties. We are all beneficiaries of these treaties, every single one of us standing here today. It's time for President Obama and Prime Minister Harper to start honoring the foundations of this country and honoring those treaties. Every landowner, every Native American, we have treaty rights, and it's time for us to assert them and take back our roles as caretakers and stewards of this land. We can no longer afford to be economic hostages in the race to industrialize Mother Earth for her resources. In northern Alberta, where our communities are from, our communities are seeing the poisoning of our water systems, the destructions of our landscapes and our traditional treaty territories. We are seeing the annihilation of our animals and our culture. We can no longer stand idly by and allow this to happen. My nation, the Athabasca Chippewa First Nation, is taking all means necessary to protect our treaty territory. We are suing Shell Oil. We are suing the federal government. And we will challenge any application that comes into our traditional territory. My sister, Crystal Lehman, her nation is taking the government to court for over 17,000 infractions of treaty rights in her territory. Obama needs to say no, because if this pipeline goes through, it spells the green light to go ahead to continue annihilating our people and our culture. We need to not just stop this pipeline, but every pipeline. We need to send a message that enough is enough, and we need to start taking care of Mother Earth and our people and the future generations. Masi Cho.
More and more people are taking direct action to confront the carbon criminals and to minimize the growing climate disaster. Jason O'Hara sailed a small boat to Somerset, Massachusetts, and stopped coal delivery for 12 hours to the massive Brayton Point coal-to-electricity plant.
At 6 a.m. on Wednesday, May 15th, we had a short prayer meeting on the dock at Newport with my friend Marla, who was our media spokesperson and our spiritual center for the day and the action. Set off under a brilliant cloudless blue sky with not a breath of wind north of Narragansett Bay towards Somerset. We anchored our little white lobster boat with a big 350 banner and a banner with the hashtag cold is stupid on top of it, right off the coal pier. And first we dropped our little boat-sized anchor, and then we dropped our 200-pound mushroom mooring anchor that was chained to the keel, making ourselves immovable. Lo and behold, way continued to open. The Wi-Fi hotspot that wasn't working on the way up started to work. The iPad that we had bought to live stream the whole thing, we figured out how to live stream it because we hadn't really gotten that to work before. And lo and behold, on the way up, because we got the internet working, we could check to make sure that, in fact, the energy enterprise was starting to come up from Newport. We waited. We were boarded, we waited for almost an hour after we dropped anchor and called the Somerset police to let them know of our action and our intent. Telling them that we were a non-violent, peaceful protest. Took them 2 phone calls to actually figure out what we were doing. We were boarded by the Coast Guard. There were three charming young gentlemen who came on board. And they spent the next 6.5 or 7 hours hanging out with us on the boat, trying to figure out what to do with us. We were cooperative and friendly and peaceful. We were happy to talk with them and let them know what was going on. And we told them that we had this 200-pound anchor which was chained to the keel and that we really couldn't be moved. In the meantime, the Energy Enterprise came in and kind of half-docked on the pier in a way that she would be safely up against the pier, but not in a place where she could have unloaded her coal.
Amazingly, he won over the district attorney, convincing him that the health and climate effects of coal burning were so dangerous that he had acted justly. The DA dropped all criminal charges.
J. O'Hara appreciate the Commonwealth's decision today to dismiss all criminal charges. Ken Ward and J. O'Hara stood up for what is right, and now DA Sutter has stood up for what is right. Thank you.
The decision that Robert Kidd and I, as the Assistant District Attorney who handled this case, reached today was a decision that certainly took into consideration the cost to the taxpayers in Somerset, but was made with our concern for their children, the children of Bristol County and beyond in mind. Climate change is one of the greatest crises our planet has ever faced. In my humble opinion, the political leadership on this issue has been gravely lacking. I am heartened that we were able to forge an agreement that both parties were pleased with and that appeared to satisfy the police and those here in sympathy with the individuals who were charged. I am also extremely pleased that we were able to reach an agreement that symbolizes our commitment at the Bristol County District Attorney's Office to take a leadership role on this issue. Amen. Well, I certainly will be in New York in 2 weeks. How's that? I'm walking around with Jonah Piven's article from Rolling Stone here.
Keep in mind is they're still burning coal over there. In fact, they're burning twice as much coal last year than they did the year before. This is a plant that's supposed to be phasing out. That's the problem. I mean, we just found out this summer that the Western Antarctic ice shelf is in collapse. Nothing we can do about it. 10 feet of sea level rise. In that context, it seems to me the only thing one can do is put yourself in the way. I mean, that's what we're facing. We have to stop this because the world doesn't know it is ending. And if you think about it, if you're approaching it from that point of view, what happens to us here is small.
So you're happy with the word that has been gotten out by the fact.
see O'Hara's whole talk on our video channel, Struggle Video Media. Now, American Omar Abu Khair, who was shot at a protest in Egypt.
I was scheduled to leave Egypt 2 days after that, and it was the last day that I was supposed to be in Egypt. It was a Friday. I was leaving that night at dawn, and I heard about a protest in a nearby city that I decided that as kind of like a last-ditch effort of support, the last thing I could do is I could just go out and just show one last time, participate with these people in a protest. And on our way, I took local transportation, and when I arrived at the protest, the street that I was supposed to be in, I seen that it was completely blocked off by security forces, and you were just met by a cloud of just tear gas, just immediately hit you as soon as you get into the region, like still 4 or 5 blocks away. And I decided that I was going to get into the actual street where the protesters were. So I started going through all these side streets to try to get in there, and you've seen that the security forces had completely blocked off the side streets, not allowing anybody inside, so you don't know what's happening to the people on the inside. You don't know nobody on the outside could see what's happening to them in there. And it wasn't through like a maze of side streets that I was actually able to get to the protesters. And when I actually reached their position, I found myself immediately in what seemed like a war zone. Like I walked through the side street, and I was in the middle of the protesters, and on my left, about 2 blocks out, there was probably a mob of no less than 300 security forces, army personnel, thugs who seemed to be like cooperating with them, and just local police, and they were just kind of standing there 2 blocks out, just shooting indiscriminately into a crowd of women, children, young teenagers, senior citizens, people who had absolutely nowhere to go because they were trapped. They were really cornered into the street, and they were just being shot at indiscriminately. And I remember standing there, and I really couldn't believe that this is happening. Like, coming from somebody who grew up in America, and like with the rights that we have over here, and then going to a place like that, and just it was a very surreal experience. I really couldn't believe that something like this could be happening in today's world, especially in 2014. And I remember standing among these people, and it was very difficult to just really understand like what exactly was going on, because as you're standing there, there's people to your left and right who every now and then someone would just get shot, boom, drop, and then they'd be carried away. Like, you don't even know where they're even going to be carried to, because there's no way out. And we're over here just standing here. There's women and children. They're kind of just hovering in a corner in the middle of the street, and they have absolutely nowhere to go. Infants, like like what do you do? Like, who could you go to when it's the government that's doing the killing? Like, who are we gonna call? We're gonna call the police? Like, who are you gonna go to when the government, your own government, is the one that's coming out and killing you indiscriminately in the streets? So I stood there, and I decided to stand in the front of the protesters with the young teens who were throwing rocks back in kind of a futile attempt to hold off the security forces. And as I was standing with them, about, I think, like 30, 45 minutes or an hour into the experience, I can't really tell, I was actually shot myself. My arm went numb out of nowhere, and my head sort of started, like, it felt like it was ringing. And I turned around to see what happened, and there's just blood gushing out of my arm, and my whole face was immediately covered in blood. And I'm in a country where I don't really know the city that I'm in. I don't really know many people. So I just started like jogging. I have no idea where I'm going, but I had nowhere to go. Like, I really had nowhere to go. And I made my way by some miraculous path. I made my way out of those side streets, and I ended up flagging down a random motorcycle that was passing by, and I asked this guy to give me a ride to the hospital. And you could see him hesitate sort of to give me a ride, because he knew I was a protester, and he knew if he was stopped with me that he would probably be sent off to jail or something simply by associating himself with a protester. But I really, like, I guess his sympathy got the best of him, and he actually allowed me, he told me to get on the motorcycle, and he gave me a ride to the hospital. And it really gives you insight at like his reaction upon getting to the hospital. Like, really, defines really the situation in Egypt. Like, I'm somebody who's been shot. I'm over here compressing like the blood that's gushing out of the random parts of my body. I still had no idea what I was even shot with. I had no idea what a cartouche was at the time, which was more like a buckshot. And he drops me off like around like the corner of the gates of the hospital, and he's like, listen, you're on your own from here. And then he just lets me off because he didn't want to go anywhere near the hospital. And then as I walk to the gates, I see security forces standing at the gates, meeting just everybody who's coming in, because they knew that when they attacked the protests, they knew people were going to be shot, people were going to be killed, and the first place they were going to go was the hospital. So, according to their plan, what better place to sit there and wait for protesters than the gates of a hospital? And I wasn't met with a medical team or some trauma team as you would expect with somebody who's still bleeding. I was instead met with a team of investigators, some army personnel, and some security forces who instead proceeded to take down my information so that they could book me and send me off to jail with absolutely no medical attention, with absolutely no charge, just nothing. Just, you're a protester, that's it, you're going to jail. Shot or not shot, bleeding to death or not, it didn't matter to them. What mattered was just this was somebody that we were going to send off to jail with absolutely no respect for any type of humanity. And they sat there and took my information for 10 to 15 minutes. And then it wasn't until then that I actually let them know that I was an American citizen. And it really came up randomly in the discussion. They asked me what college I went to as like a part of their information, I guess, that they were taking from me. They asked me what college I went to, and I told them I go to Rutgers University. And then he hesitated for a second. He was like, where's that at? And I told him it was in New Jersey. And then that's when he realized that I was an American citizen. And then as soon as that happened, you see him pause for a second, and then they were like, all right, 1 second, we'll be right back. And then they go speak to the higher-ups, and they come back, and then after they come back, they're like, listen, we don't want any trouble. I'm sure you don't want any trouble. Just take yourself and go home. Again, this is from the front door, like pretty much of the hospital. I haven't seen a doctor. I haven't received a Band-Aid, not even a gauze pad, no type of medical attention, and they're just sending me off, just, you're lucky you're not going to jail. So I left at that point, obviously, and that was my last day in Egypt anyway. And I ended up leaving the country later that night, boarded the plane, still haven't received any medical attention. And it wasn't until the next day that I actually got to America that I actually went to a proper hospital. And I was met by a trauma team, actually, and they told me that they can't really operate because it would cause way too much nerve damage to try to get all the pellets out, because there's at least 30 pellets, I think, in my body. So they told me that you're just going to have to live with it for the rest of your life. And I sort of stayed a year, like kind of dormant, not really active. Really, I participated in the protests here in New York with the organization IDHAD, who I actually happened to be attending, but I participated in these protests. And that's about it. I didn't really talk to nobody. I didn't really like reach out, try to make my story heard or anything, simply because I felt like I was just a statistic. I was one in thousands. I felt very insignificant. And it wasn't until the organization Egyptians Abroad for Democracy Worldwide that they had convinced me to actually try to pursue some type of legal action and to try to make my voice heard. And it was really upon contemplating that concept that I realized that it's an obligation upon me to try to make my voice heard, to try to pursue legal action. Because if I don't care about my rights, then there are thousands and thousands of people in prison in Egypt and buried in their graves who will never have the opportunity to make their voice heard. They will never have the opportunity to sit in front of you here today and to tell you what they witnessed and what happened to them. They'll never see that opportunity. So for somebody who actually has that opportunity, it's not just an obligation for my own rights, but it's for their rights that I have to come out and I have to make my voice heard and I have to tell you my story just so you know what they're witnessing over there. And that's practically it. I came here and I've spoken to a few senators and a few congressmen, and I went to my attorney general trying to pursue an actual criminal case against Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Omar Ibrahim. And I submitted my case, and as of right now, it was pending for a while, and then now the Department of Justice is really trying to halt it, to try to bring it to a stop, probably for the political international foreign relations or whatever might be their perspective on it, but they're really trying to stop it. So I spoke to a few senators and I'm trying to reach out to a few human rights organizations to try to bring public attention to the matter, to let them know that we're not gonna stop. As Omar had said earlier, we're gonna bring these people that committed these crimes accountable, no matter what is the cost.
Just a couple of years ago, the Obama administration was glowing after overthrowing the government of Libya at no cost in American lives. Supposedly, democracy was going to take root. Instead, total chaos. An American ambassador assassinated, and all our diplomats eventually chased out of the country. On December 26th, Al Jazeera had this report.
Smoke rises over an oil tank that was hit by a rocket at the Al Sidra terminal. Fighters belonging to the group Libyan Dawn launched the surprise attack. They fired missiles from speedboats during fierce fighting with guards at the site. Libya's oil terminals are mainly in the east of the country. They're under the control of forces affiliated to former General Khalifa Haftar. His men have been fighting alongside soldiers from the internationally recognized government based in Tobruk. But Libya is under the control of two rival governments, each supported by armed groups engaged in daily fighting. In August, militias opposed to the government of Abdullah al-Thani took over the capital Tripoli. Their own government was put in place, led by Omar al-Hassi. And in November, the country's Supreme Court invalidated the election of the parliament led by al-Thani, citing violations of Libya's provisional constitution. Rival militias have also formed two loosely affiliated blocs, one backing the government in Tobruk, which is seen as more moderate, the other backing leaders in Tripoli and seen as more religiously conservative. Libyan Dawn is a loose coalition of militias broadly aligned with the Tripoli-based government. The current fighting is based around the Al Sidra oil terminal. Libyan Dawn wants to secure it before moving on to Libya's other main oil ports. Fighting around the terminals has caused the country's oil production to fall by a third. It's also put Libya's only significant source of revenue under threat. Victoria Gatenby, Al Jazeera.
We close with a song by Phil Mansour, recorded during last summer's monstrous assault by Israel on the people of Gaza.
Nothing I say, nothing I do, how far I travel brings me closer to you. But we are connected, never apart, through the dark tunnels, connecting our hearts. Desert to walk through, a tall high wall between me and you. We are connected, perfect day. We are connected, never apart, through the dark tunnels, connecting our hearts. We are connected, never apart, through the dark tunnels, connecting our hearts. We are connected, never apart, through the dark tunnels, connecting our hearts. We are connected. We are connected.
That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller, and this is The Struggle.